I should just say that Daniel, who prayed earlier, who's the new curate here at St. Clement's, he'll be in the corner after the sermon and after the service. And if there's anything you'd like prayer for, please go and speak to Daniel. He'll be more than happy to pray with you. So Mark chapter 9. Well, we are continuing our series in the book of Mark, looking at the life of Jesus. And we find ourselves here in chapter 9. And chapters 9 and 10 of Mark's Gospel are all about discipleship. Jesus teaches his disciples about his new kingdom and about the values of that kingdom. See, towards the end of Mark chapter 8, Peter has made... Mark has been showing us that Jesus is the Christ. He's the King who has come. And at the end of Mark chapter 8, Peter gets it. And he makes the declaration that Jesus is the King. He is the Christ. Now, whenever there's a new king, whenever there's a new kingdom, there are always new values. You know, we've just got a new Prime Minister this week, Boris Johnson. And what's he done? Well, he's brought in a new administration. Out with the old, in with the new. He's brought in a new pattern of values, a pattern of positivity, he says. A new way of doing things that's going to be different than the old way. We're going to do things in a different way that's going to have a different impact on people's lives, a better impact on people's lives. And that's always the case. If your football team this summer might have got a new football manager, the same thing happens. New regime, new way to train, and hopefully a new impact, which will be promotion or winning the league. You see, whenever there is a new king, there is a new kingdom and a new set of values. And Jesus, in these chapters, is saying, I am bringing in a new set of values which is different from the values of this world. Because I'm bringing in a new kingdom, and I am the king of that kingdom. Now, the difference in values is probably seen more starkly when it comes to greatness. The way this world, our world, views greatness and the way that Jesus views greatness in his kingdom are completely opposite. And this is what we're looking at this morning, and this is really helpful for us to see. Because all of us here live in one of those two kingdoms. You're either a member of Jesus' kingdom or a member of this world's kingdom. And the way that you view greatness will be affected by that. But even if you're here this morning and you're a member of Jesus' kingdom, you can still live under the influence of the kingdom of this world. And so understanding the pattern and the values of Jesus' kingdom will help you live better as a Christian in this world. So, according to Jesus, what is true greatness? Well, we're told three things about true greatness in these verses. We're told the pattern of true greatness, the marks of true greatness, and the way of true greatness. The pattern of it, the marks of it, and the way of it. First of all, the pattern of true greatness. Jesus and his disciples here they're on a journey. They're passing through Galilee, where Jesus conducted a lot of his ministry, and they are on the way. They're on the way to Jerusalem. They're on the way to the cross. And for the second time in Mark's Gospel, Jesus teaches his disciples about what's going to happen, about his suffering and about his death. And for the second time in Mark's Gospels, the disciples don't understand. And so they stay quiet. In fact, they stay quiet. They don't ask him any questions, but they have a question which they're discussing themselves. And the question's about greatness. And so Jesus picks up that theme of greatness and teaches them about what it means to be great. He tells me in verse 35, they're arguing about greatness, and Jesus says, if anybody would be first. See, Jesus knows that the disciples want to be great. Jesus knows that you and I want to be great. There's something deep within us that longs to be somebody, that longs for greatness. There's something in us that doesn't like insignificance. And the reason for that is because that's the way God made you. God made you to be a somebody, not a nobody. He made you to be great and significant. And so the question is, how can you be great? How can you be significant? Where's true greatness found? Well, Jesus says, he says, if anyone would be first, if anyone wants to be great, he must be last of all and servant of all. See, Jesus says, in my kingdom, the way to be great is to be a servant. The way to be first is to be last. The way up, the way to get to the top, is to go down to the bottom. Now, that's the opposite of the way the world views greatness. You see, how does the world view greatness? Well, to be great in the world is to be prime minister, to be powerful, to be able to tell people what to do, be in a position of authority. To be great in the world is to be successful, to make stuff happen. To be great in the world is to be honored by other people, for other people to come and say, aren't you a great person? For hundreds of people to attend your funeral and to say at your funeral, they were one of the greatest people we've ever known. To be great in the world is to be rich, to make lots of money, to have other people serve you. See, that's the way we view greatness in the world. A few years ago, there was a survey. You might remember it. It was conducted to find out who we thought the greatest 100 Britons are. And if you look at the list of the people, they are people who are rich, powerful, successful, intelligent, beautiful, important. And who's top of the list? I remember it was Winston Churchill. Because, of course, he was successful. He helped win the Second World War. And so if you take those things as the criteria for greatness, what are the things that we avoid? Well, we avoid weakness. You avoid suffering. You avoid rejection. You avoid sacrifice. Why would you want any of those things? Because they're not going to make you great. They're not going to make you a somebody. It's ridiculous to pursue those sorts of things. What do you want to value? What do you want to pursue? You want to pursue success and beauty and money and honor and recognition and approval. Those are the things that you want because those are the things that will make you great. Well, if this world is all that there is, then that's natural to do that. It's natural to pursue that sort of greatness because it makes a difference to your life now. It makes a difference to life now generally. Because what's life about now, if this world is all that there is? Life now is all about fight of the fittest. Up with the strong, down with the weak. But what if this life is not all that there is? What if there's another life to come? What if there's another kingdom with another king? A kingdom which is going to last forever. You see, one of the problems with living for those things that we just talked about is that one day all those things are going to go because life is going to go. One day, if you live for those things, one day you'll lose those things. If to make your life great, you pursue riches, one day you're going to lose it all. If you pursue success, one day you're going to lose it all. If you pursue honor of other people, then one day there will be nobody alive who remembers who you are. If you seek to be great and to be full now, one day you're going to be empty. But Jesus says, if you pursue greatness in my kingdom, then you will be great forever. But Jesus says the values of my kingdom are so utterly, totally different to the values of this world. Pursuing greatness is not about having power and being successful and being honored by others and being rich. It's about service. It's about not being first, but being last. It's not pushing yourself forward, it's being the servant of all. See, this is so countercultural. It's counterintuitive. And yet that's the way Jesus says to be great. And Jesus himself is the example of that. He's on his way to Jerusalem to die. He said he's come to serve. You know, Jesus is probably the greatest, most influential person who's ever lived. And yet, how did his life end up? He died in suffering and in agony and in nakedness on a cross. The way to be great is to be the servant. The way to the top is to get to the bottom. The way up is down. See, that's true greatness. And so what does that look like? What does greatness look like? What does it mean to be a servant? What's it look like to serve? That's the second thing we see, is the marks of greatness. In fact, in these verses, there are two main marks of greatness. To be great involves humility, and to be great involves sacrifice. See, those are the marks of a servant. A servant is humble, and a servant sacrifices. So first of all, true greatness involves humility. And there's two aspects of humility in these verses. The first is this: humility is concerned about others. After the discussion about greatness, Jesus brings before the disciples a child. He takes the child in his arms and he says to them, "Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me." Now, we place a high value on children today in our society, but back in the first century, they didn't. People had lots of children. Many died, sadly, in infancy, and so there wasn't the same attachment. In fact, people in the first century thought that children were insignificant. What could they do? What could they provide for you? And Jesus says, the first mark of humility is this: that you serve people and receive people like these little children who are insignificant and unimportant. You see, the first mark of humility is that you are concerned about others. You are interested in others. You want others to be happy. You're not concerned primarily about yourself. See, this was radical in the first century, and let's be honest, it's radical today. You know, because if you're rich, if you're powerful, if you're important, then you're a somebody. And the more powerful you are, the more successful you are, the richer you are, the more other people who are less rich and less powerful and less successful are meant to serve you. You're not meant to serve them, they're meant to serve you. There's like a pecking order in society. The more you have, the more people who don't have are there to serve you. The idea that you would use your money, your time, your resources your health to serve others, to make others happy, to honor other people. But Jesus says, that's the way of my kingdom. That's what it means to be great in my kingdom. Not to be concerned about yourself and to think about yourself, but to think about others and to serve others, particularly those who are the most insignificant or those who are the least important. But there's a second aspect of humility, and that's this. Humility involves a humble person doesn't compare themselves with others. See, after the incident with the child, there's then a discussion which is initiated by John, one of the disciples. John says to Jesus, "Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he wasn't following us." And Jesus says, "Don't stop him. For no one who does a mighty work in my name will be able to soon afterwards to speak evil of me. For the one who is not against us is for us." You see, John and the disciples, they see a man who's not part of their group doing something. And they're offended by it. They're offended because he's doing something in the name of Jesus and he's not part of our gang. They're being exclusive. They're being sectarian. He doesn't follow us. Not he doesn't follow Jesus. He's not one of us. In fact, maybe they were unhappy not only because this guy wasn't part of their gang, but because of what this guy was actually doing. You see, this guy was casting out demons. And earlier in Mark chapter 9, the disciples had tried to cast out demons, and they'd failed to do that. And now there's this guy who's not one of them, one of the disciples, who's actually doing what they themselves can't do. They compare themselves with him. And they're jealous. See, one of the ways that the world encourages us to view our greatness is by comparing ourselves with other people. You know, am I richer or more powerful or more successful or more attractive than other people? And that's what the disciples were doing. They were comparing themselves, and they weren't happy with this guy. They weren't happy because he was in a different gang. They weren't happy because he was doing something that they couldn't. They lacked humility. But you see, in Jesus' kingdom, Jesus says, you don't compare yourselves with other people. In fact, in Jesus' kingdom, you're as happy if other people are successful as you would be if you were that successful yourself. In Jesus' kingdom, you're happy receiving the silver medal and looking at the person who wins the gold medal in swimming and the time that it took them to cross, to get from one side to the other, and to say, weren't they great? Isn't that wonderful? You see, true humility is as happy for someone else to succeed as you are if you succeed yourself. Because in true humility, you don't compare yourself with other people. Because you're not thinking about yourself at all. See, the first aspect of true greatness is humility, but there's a second mark of true greatness, and that's this. It's sacrifice. In verses 43 to 50, we've got some of the strongest language in the whole of Mark's gospel. And it is strong language. It's strong imagery. Now, when Jesus talks about cutting off hands and cutting off feet and gouging out eyes, he's not talking literally. He's talking metaphorically, symbolically. You see, the metaphors of eyes and hands and feet, they're meant to include what you see and what you do and where you go. The metaphors for those things, describing those things. And what Jesus is saying is this: as important as body parts are to our lives are more important than our body parts. Life is found in the kingdom of God, not in your hands and your feet and your eyes, as important as those things are. And so what Jesus is saying is this: nothing in this life should get in the way of you making it to heaven, no matter how important those things are. See, Jesus says there's a stark choice in life. There's God's kingdom, and there's the fire that doesn't go out. There's life forever, and there's the worm that never stops gnawing. These are Jesus' words. They're really strong words. And they're meant to bring us up short, because they're meant to help us see that in life there's a stark choice. See, being a servant, being great, involves committing yourself completely to Jesus Christ and getting rid of everything in your life that obstructs that. It's total commitment. That's what verses 49 and 50 are all about at the end, which seem a bit funny. Everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its saltiness, how will you make it salty again? Have salt in yourselves. What's he talking about? Well, fire and salt were essential parts of Old Testament sacrifices. When the priests went into the temple to offer sacrifices, they'd offer a burnt offering for sin, fire. And every time they offered a sacrifice, they would sprinkle salt on it. And so fire and salt, these are symbols of what it means to be a servant, what it means to follow Jesus. See, to follow Jesus involves sacrifice. It involves total commitment of your life. And the result of this sacrifice and being totally committed is peace and unity. Have peace with one another. You know, the reason there's conflict in the world, the reason that we fall out with each other, the reason there's relational breakdown in the world is because we're more aware of other people's faults than we are of our own. We think we're better people than we actually are. You know, we think we've got it all together and other people don't have it all together. And we look at other people and criticize them because we think, you know, I'm better than that. But when you live as a sacrifice, when you are totally committed to God, then you don't look at other people like that because you're so bothered about your own faults and your own failings. You don't look at other people and see the speck in their eye, you see the log in your own eye. And when people come and criticize you for what they see, you take that as an opportunity to change because you want to be totally committed to Jesus Christ. See, that's the marks of greatness. The marks of greatness are humility and sacrifice. That's what it means to be a servant. That's what it means to follow Jesus Christ. And so finally, how do you become like that? How do you become the sort of person who is happy when other people succeed and you don't? Happy when people get what you want? How do you become the sort of person that when other people criticize you, you don't ignore them or get devastated by it, but see it as an opportunity to change? How can you be the sort of person who's not always comparing yourself with others on Facebook? How do you become great? Well, the way of greatness is not found by anything that you can do, Because if you turn around and say, well, I am going to be a servant. I'm going to be humble. I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to make myself great. You can't do that. Because in Jesus' kingdom, that's not the way that greatness works. I'm going to be the most humble person in the world. That's not the way humility works. Because you're looking to yourself to do it. See, the only way that you will become a servant is by looking away from yourself to the ultimate servant, and the ultimate servant is Jesus Christ. See, Jesus says at the start of this passage that he has come to be delivered by God, delivered to suffering, delivered to death. And who is it who's been delivered to these things? It's Jesus, it's the King. It's the King who is God himself. God who came from heaven to earth. Talk about a come down. Came from a throne to a manger. Lived a life of poverty. Lived a life of insignificance. And when he died, how did he die? Well, he was stripped naked, nailed to a wooden cross, condemned as a criminal, even though he committed no crime, abandoned by his friends, betrayed by one of his followers, mocked by his enemies. And yet, it doesn't stop there, because he rose again from the dead. And God has exalted him to the highest place, so that one day at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. You see, Jesus is the ultimate example of the servant who has become a king. He's the ultimate example of what it means to be great. He loses his life to gain life. He becomes a nobody to become the greatest person who's ever lived. And the way that you will become great is by looking to him and seeing that he's done all those things for you. You see, the reason he came that low was for you. The reason he became a nobody is so that you could become a somebody. The reason he was nailed to a cross and died was so that you can live. He took upon himself the punishment and the judgment you deserve for all the ways that you try and make yourself great. And he was punished on the cross for those things. He received the judgment you deserve so that you can receive the life that he deserves. So that you can be a somebody, not a nobody. So that you can be great instead of insignificant. So that you can live instead of die. So that you can be transformed into his likeness. So that you can be somebody who lives a truly great life. Who lives a truly great life, not by going out into the world and seeking greatness as the world seeks it, but by going out into the world to serve others. By going out into the world in humility. By going out into the world to sacrifice. By going out into the world not to seek your own happiness, but the happiness of others. Not to seek your own honor, but seek the honor of others. That's the way to be great. And the more you see what Jesus has done for you, the more you will do that. The more you will seek to be a blessing rather than seek to get other people to bless you. That's where true greatness is found. It's found in our servant King, who calls us to follow him and to give our lives as an offering to Jesus Christ, our servant King. Let me pray.